That's a good question. Did you all catch that question? Cool Puppy just asked me, who first came up with the idea of the presidential library? And I think the answer is George Washington. I think George Washington envisioned all of his papers going into one library. He was meticulous about preserving his papers, preserving his documentation. After his service in the Revolutionary War, he took a few months to actually go through all of his correspondence, all of his written orders and so forth, and to document it all very carefully, because he seemed to understand that he had a responsibility to citizens of his country and more importantly to future citizens of his country to keep these papers in order. Now, unfortunately, after he died, many of the papers went to disparate places. Some of them were destroyed. And that's somewhat the story of what happened to our presidential papers for really most of this country's history. Abraham Lincoln had papers go all over the place. They were spread here and there. His secretaries had some. His wife had some. His law partner had some. And you can go on eBay sometimes today and see these unscrupulous people who get their hands on these letters and who have cut them up so that they can sell. You might not be able to afford an entire letter written by Lincoln, but you might be able to afford a T. Have to be a small one in my case. In any event, a president could do whatever he wanted to do with his papers. Some of them burned them. Most of them stuck them in attics where they got destroyed. Now, as time wore on, a lot of people started going to the Library of Congress and dropping them off there. But not everybody did that. Now then, Franklin Roosevelt comes along. And Franklin Roosevelt thinks about putting his papers in the Library of Congress, but then he has a really sort of dramatic idea, an idea that scholars should be thanking him for. And his idea is, I'm going to create a presidential library. This is not only going to be the library that has all of my papers, and as Roosevelt said, if there wasn't an institute like this, my papers would be separated. My service in the Navy, those papers would go to the Navy archives. My papers as a young man would go over to Hyde Park. The White House papers would probably go to the Library of Congress. But no, Roosevelt has a different idea. I'm going to create a presidential library that's not only going to have all of my papers, it's also going to have papers of other people that are important in my administration. It's going to have Wallace's papers. It's going to have his wife Eleanor's papers. It's going to have all the documentation that a person would need to really get a sound understanding of his time and his presidency. And he's not only going to do that, he's going to put this institute right in Hyde Park, right by his house. So think about that. What Roosevelt is ensuring for the future is that when people come to do work on Franklin Roosevelt, they're not only going to be able to find a place where all of his papers are, but they're going to be able to see what he called his stuff. They're going to be able to see his stamp collection. They're going to be able to see his ships in bottles. Well, what's going on here is even more dramatic than that. And you know that if you go to the Franklin Roosevelt Library, because he is everywhere around you. He's created that library. There's his house with the pillars he wanted put into the house as a young man, already envisioning that he was going to be president. And you go into the library that he had built to look just like his Uncle Teddy's library. And you see the elevator he used, where he would pull himself up and down and over again to give himself strength. And you look at that elevator and you realize that he must have had the upper body strength of a prize fighter. And you are infused with the spirit of Franklin Roosevelt, which is only going to help your scholarship. It's only going to spur your imagination. It's only going to make whatever you write about Franklin Roosevelt more real. And if you're just interested in Franklin Roosevelt, the same thing applies. You're going to go there, you're going to be able to see his things, see his papers, but you're also going to see all the things that mattered to him most in the place that mattered to him most. So this is a wonderful idea that Franklin Roosevelt had. But will it fly? Well, Franklin Roosevelt knows better to think that it's going to be easy. He knows it's not going to be easy. So being Franklin Roosevelt, he comes up with a manipulative way to try to sort of get this thing through. This is too green. Nothing should be this green unless it's wheatgrass. He's going to create a situation where people are telling him what a good idea this would be. So he goes out and basically he gets scholars of his day to write letters saying, well, wouldn't it be great to have a presidential library in Hyde Park, basically. He's going to respond to this. And then he's going to try to get this thing through Congress, and he's going to create this thing called a presidential library. Well, I just told you what this is. This is a wonderful idea, right? Who could possibly be against an idea like this? I'll tell you in the next segment.